The quiet fracture appears when perception no longer rushes to define. Something vast trembles behind the act of naming, the world before language, pure and unmeasured. The observer once thought clarity came from words, but each name carved a border, turning living mystery into labeled matter. When the need to describe fades, sight becomes untouched by memory. In that still moment, perception returns to its native innocence. There is no tree, no sky, no you. Only the silent pulse of being watching itself unfold, unnamed, unbroken, free. The act seems innocent, a sound, a concept, a label gently placed upon what is seen. Yet in that instant, the seamless totality of perception fractures. The mind, eager to define, interrupts the direct pulse of seeing and installs itself as the interpreter. This insertion is so subtle, so constant, that the observer rarely notices the theft. What was once immediate becomes mediated. The flower that simply was now becomes rose, carrying the echo of 1,000 remembered roses. The living moment dissolves into the archive of thought. The mind names because it fears the unknown. Naming offers the illusion of mastery. It says, "I know this." But what it truly knows is the symbol, never the thing itself. Between the name and what is named, a membrane appears. On one side, the observer. On the other, the observed. Consciousness splits itself into subject and object, into knower and known. And from that first division, all other separations are born, self and other, light and dark, sacred and ordinary. The infinite becomes categorized, catalogued, domesticated by language. If one watches closely, it is possible to feel the instant this mechanism activates. A flicker of thought, the faint contraction of recognition, and immediately perception narrows. The world that just a second ago was boundless now becomes a manageable picture. The mind has taken the vast field of presence and drawn lines across it, as if sketching borders on an endless sea. Each word, each concept, becomes a fence erected within awareness. This is not to condemn thought. The mind's ability to name has built civilizations, shaped knowledge, and transmitted meaning across time. But within the realm of direct seeing, that same function becomes the veil. The brain believes that by naming, it preserves reality. In truth, it replaces reality with an image of its own making. What remains unseen is that every label drags a shadow, the memory of past experience. Tree is not the living vibration before you. It is the mind's condensation of all trees it has known. The moment the word arises, the eye no longer meets the real tree, but its ghost. Try watching without naming. A leaf trembles, light bends across its surface, wind shifts its weight. The observer waits for the familiar word to appear, leaf. And in that moment something is lost, the freshness, the direct encounter, the aliveness that cannot be contained. The name has stepped between you and the world. It seems to connect, yet it divides. The mechanism of naming is not merely linguistic, it is energetic. Each concept carries emotional and neural pathways that have been reinforced over a lifetime. Neuroscience reveals that the brain fires in predictable patterns when recognizing and labeling stimuli. Those patterns become habits of perception, grooves through which awareness repeatedly flows. Thus, naming is not passive. It sculpts the nervous system. It tells the body how to feel, what to expect, and what to ignore. Imagine the first time a child sees rain. There is no word yet, only shimmering movement, the sensation of water meeting skin. Wonder is total. The next time it rains, the word arrives, rain. The child now knows what it is, at least in thought. The direct mystery has been translated into concept. The more the concept repeats, the more the mystery recedes. Adults call this understanding. But what if understanding is merely the refinement of forgetfulness? When the observer names, identity strengthens. I am the one who sees the tree. The name builds the observer's boundary. Without it, the line between seeing and seen blurs. That blur is intolerable to the ego, for the ego depends on distinction to exist. So it names incessantly to reaffirm its position in the world. Through this repetition, a structure of separation is maintained, a lattice of words and meanings that gives the illusion of solidity. Silence then becomes threatening, because silence erodes the scaffolding. If one stops naming, who remains to interpret? The observer trembles before the possibility of vanishing, because without language there is no narrative self. Yet that vanishing is precisely the threshold of truth. To see without naming is to return to the unfiltered current of consciousness itself, where perception and the perceived are one motion. Some traditions have sensed this deeply. The mystics of various ages spoke of the unspeakable, the nameless, not as poetic excess but as exact description. What cannot be named cannot be possessed. What cannot be possessed cannot be divided. The Tao Te Ching begins with a warning. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The line points directly to the trap of cognition. The instant something is named, it becomes a fragment of the whole. The modern mind resists this truth. It demands definitions, frameworks, measurable outcomes. Yet the essence of perception lives outside those boundaries. To live entirely in names is to inhabit a map while forgetting the territory. Words can describe the path, but never the walking. They can record the song, but never the vibration that makes it alive. When the observer begins to notice this mechanism in real time, something remarkable happens. The distance between thought and perception grows visible. The next time a sound arises, watch how quickly the mind calls it bird, traffic makes wind. See how the label flattens the experience into familiarity. Then, for a brief instant, suspend the label. Let the sound simply be vibration. No name, no category. Feel the raw encounter. Untranslated, vast, intimate. In that gap, consciousness recognizes itself. The observer is no longer outside the event, but inside the pulse of existence. The mechanism that separates has paused, and what remains is presence itself, whole, nameless, unrepeatable. The mind may return and resume its labeling, but now you have seen the trick. You know the magician's hand, and with that knowledge, the spell begins to weaken. This is the hidden mechanism of the mind, the compulsion to replace reality with its description. Once seen, it cannot rule with the same authority. The observer starts to discern between the word and the world, between the echo and the source, and in that discernment, a subtle freedom appears, the possibility of seeing without walls, of touching what is before all language, of remembering that the act of naming is not vision but distance. The next time the impulse to name arises, pause, let the name dissolve before it forms. What remains in that silence is the living field where everything meets, pure observation before the birth of illusion. Light strikes the surface of a stone. The eye receives it before the mind interferes. For a fraction of a second, perception stands alone. No story, no recognition, no echo of language. Then thought rushes in, attaching its label, stone. That single word folds the vast immediacy of perception into a concept. Yet within the gap between the seeing and the thought, freedom waits. This interval is not time. It is awareness before memory, the bare clarity untouched by interpretation. Most of life unfolds while this instant goes unnoticed. The gaze moves too quickly. Thought overlays reality like paint covering the texture of raw wood. But once the observer tastes that silent space, the moment before thought, it becomes impossible to forget. Everything seen afterward carries the faint trace of that stillness. The pause does not require effort. It cannot be achieved through force. It reveals itself the moment attention slows enough to notice the birth of thought. In that noticing, perception loosens from its old dependence on naming. The world begins to appear less as an inventory of things and more as an unfolding movement without borders. The familiar loses its armor of definition. A single sound can open the gate, the cry of a distant bird, the hum of a refrigerator, the rhythm of breath. At first, the mind translates automatically, bird, machine, breathing. But stay just before the translation. Listen from the ear rather than the intellect. The sound is not a thing, but a pulse, a shimmer in space. Awareness and vibration are inseparable. In that unity, the observer dissolves into the act of listening. The pause between gaze and thought carries a texture of stillness that cannot be manufactured. It is already present beneath every experience, like the quiet floor beneath footsteps. The mind's constant labeling simply obscures it. Once the observer glimpses this underlying quiet, attention begins to rest differently, less as pursuit, more as reception. Seeing becomes intimate without possession. Scientific language calls this a disruption of predictive coding. The brain expects patterns, fills gaps, labels what it already knows. The pause interrupts this cycle. It prevents perception from being reduced to expectation. The nervous system, deprived of its usual labels, becomes more sensitive, more alive. Every shape, color, and vibration appears new. What was routine becomes radiant. The shift is not mystical in the sense of escaping the world. It is mystical in its precision. The pause exposes how reality forms. First, perception arises, then thought names. Between those two events lies the untouched ground of consciousness. To remain there, even briefly, is to witness creation without the interference of commentary. The leaf before leaf, the light before light, the self before I. A gentle practice begins to emerge from this recognition. As the eyes meet any object, a hand, a wall, a reflection, the observer waits one breath before naming, not resisting thought, simply delaying its arrival. The delay reveals the silence underneath. The object seems to glow from within, not with mystic light, but with clarity. The mind's boundaries loosen, and the world reclaims its original transparency. The body also responds. Muscles soften, breath slows, the nervous system finds coherence. The observer no longer stands outside looking in. Awareness feels distributed throughout the field of perception. This is not detachment, but deeper contact. The gaze no longer cuts reality into pieces. It listens to the whole. In this listening, an inversion happens. It is not the observer who sees the world, but the world that seems to awaken inside the observer. Attention reverses direction. Instead of reaching outward, perception flows inward, recognizing its own source. The separation between subject and object begins to thin. The mind, deprived of its habitual task of labeling, becomes transparent to what is. The pause reveals the futility of constant interpretation. Thought, useful as it is for survival, cannot grasp the living moment. It can only recall or anticipate, but the gap between gaze and thought exists entirely in the present. It is the living still point where perception has not yet been divided by time. To stand in that point, even for an instant, is to feel reality without distance. This stillness is not a void. It is fullness unmeasured. Every sound vibrates within it. Every motion arises from it. The observer who abides here experiences a kind of freedom that requires no change of circumstance. Nothing needs to be achieved or added. Freedom appears as the natural state uncovered by the absence of mental noise. From this ground, even thought becomes sacred. It loses its authority, but not its beauty. Words continue to arise, but they are transparent to the silence behind them. They no longer imprison perception, they serve it. The mind returns to its rightful place as instrument, not master. Sometimes the pause opens unexpectedly. In the hush of dawn, the rhythm of walking, the moment before a tear falls. Awareness expands effortlessly. The ordinary reveals its depth. The pause is not something to remember or sustain. It sustains everything else. As this understanding deepens, life becomes a dialogue between silence and form. The observer no longer tries to control the rhythm. Thought arises, fades, arises again, each time leaving behind the fragrance of stillness. The more this happens, the more transparent perception becomes. Naming still occurs, but it no longer separates. The pause remains visible beneath the flow of language, like the still horizon beneath waves. Freedom begins precisely there, in the unseen fraction of a second between gaze and thought. To live in awareness of that gap is to step outside the machinery of illusion. The world continues its play of forms, yet something inside remains unmoved, vast, awake. The observer no longer seeks the end of illusion as a future event. The end is already here, in the simple, luminous pause before the mind speaks its next word. A sound drifts through the air, a rustle, a breath, a pulse, and this time, the mind does not reach for it. No name rises, no story follows. The sound expands, dissolving into space. In the hush that remains, awareness stands utterly still. The observer has not vanished, but its movement has ceased. Silence is no longer the absence of noise, it is the presence of being itself. The end of naming arrives not with resistance, but with surrender. Thought has run its course, exhausted from trying to contain the uncontainable. What remains is perception without interference, vision without identity. The observer, once the restless center of experience, relaxes into the vast openness that precedes thought. In that openness, there is no division between seeing and seen. The mirror and the reflection merge. At first, the silence feels foreign, almost too wide to inhabit. The old rhythm of thought tries to return, whispering its labels to re-establish familiar boundaries. But the mind finds no foothold. Awareness has settled beneath language where no concept can reach. Everything that once demanded explanation, the tree, the body, the sky, now stands luminous and self-evident. The need to interpret fades, replaced by a quiet recognition. The world has never required description to exist. This silence is not numbness, it vibrates with life. Every color sharpens, every movement carries weight. Without the noise of naming, perception becomes an act of reverence. The simplest gesture, a shadow bending across the floor, a breath forming in the chest, feels sacred, because nothing stands between the perceiver and what is perceived. The distance created by thought has dissolved, and what remains is intimacy without effort. Stillness does not mean immobility, it is the absence of resistance. The observer no longer tries to direct the flow of experience. Sensations arise and fade within the same boundless field. Joy, sorrow, memory, and expectation all move like ripples across a quiet lake, unable to disturb its depth. The silence beneath them is untouched, unbroken, eternally whole. This moment of stillness is the true beginning of seeing. Pure vision does not depend on the eye, it arises from awareness, free of interpretation. The world appears not as a collection of things, but as a single fluid presence. The observer's old habit of cutting reality into fragments has dissolved. In its place, perception flows as one continuous gesture, spacious, transparent, alive. Every culture that has touched this silence has given it a different name, yet none has captured it. The mystics called it awakening, the scientists glimpsed it as coherence, the poets spoke of it as the clear light. But those words are only echoes of what cannot be named. The truth of silence is not an idea to hold, it is an experience that holds you. Imagine standing before a vast ocean at night. The waves move, but the sea remains unmoving in its depth. Each thought is a ripple at the surface, each emotion a pattern of light that dances and fades. The silence beneath is not separate from the waves, it is their source. When the observer falls silent, perception shifts from watching the waves to being the sea itself. There is no longer a point of view. There is only the vast field aware of its own movement. The end of illusion does not announce itself. There is no explosion, no revelation to celebrate. It unfolds quietly, like mist dissolving in morning light. The observer realizes that silence was never something to reach. It was always here beneath the noise of thought, waiting to be recognized. What disappears is not the world, but the false center that tried to control it. In this silence, action continues, but it is no longer driven by identity. Words are spoken, but they rise from clarity, not compulsion. The body moves through space, but movement feels effortless, guided by something deeper than choice. Life continues exactly as before, yet nothing is the same. The doer has vanished, leaving only doing. Seeing remains, but the seer is gone. This is the beginning of pure vision, the seeing that belongs to no one. The mind, once a screen of interpretation, has become transparent. The world shines through it, unfiltered. Even the ordinary becomes miraculous, not because it has changed, but because the veil of commentary has lifted. The silence inside and the world outside reveal themselves as the same substance. To live from this silence is not to withdraw from the world, but to participate in it, without distortion. Every encounter becomes an expression of the same still source. The eyes meet another's gaze, And for a moment there is no separation, no story, no self, only the quiet recognition of one consciousness seeing itself. Pure vision does not belong to the few. It is the birthright of all awareness. The only barrier is the noise of the observer's constant narration. The moment that narration falls away, even for an instant, the infinite becomes visible through the smallest detail. A single breath contains the universe. A fleeting sound becomes eternity itself. This silence cannot be held by will. It arrives naturally, as gravity pulls all movement back to rest. The more the observer releases control, the more easily it appears. And once it appears, it begins to teach, wordlessly, endlessly. The illusion of separation collapses, and what remains is wonder without an observer to claim it. If this stillness has touched you, let it speak through your own presence. Let your attention linger a little longer before thought begins again. Notice the weightless space that opens when you stop describing what you see. That space is the doorway you've been searching for, the home you never left. And now, before you leave this silence, do something simple. If this reflection stirred something real inside you, pause and let the stillness guide your response. Gently press like as a gesture of acknowledgement, not approval, a moment of shared awareness. Then write in the comments the word silence. Nothing more, nothing less. Let that single word be your way of practicing what you have just seen, naming not as control, but as surrender. In that act, the circle closes, the word returns to its source, and silence speaks again through you. A window opens. Morning light moves through the air, but there is no word for it yet. The mind remains quiet, and for a breath, the world reveals itself unfiltered, raw, immediate, unbroken. The light does not say it is light, it simply is. The observer, stripped of interpretation, stands in direct communion with what has always been present. This is the revelation that waits behind language, the realization that reality does not require translation to be known. In ordinary seeing, thought rushes to interpret. Sunlight, beauty, warmth, the words arise automatically, a reflex that converts living presence into concept. But in the absence of those names, perception deepens. The light no longer belongs to a category. It is an event unfolding within awareness itself. To see without language is to stand at the source of perception, where the seer and the seen share the same substance. This kind of vision does not reject words. It simply no longer depends on them. Language remains a tool, but not a veil. The observer recognizes that what words point to is never the thing itself. A word can only describe what the mind already knows, but reality is never old. It renews itself in every instant, and only a silent mind can meet it freshly. The revelation beyond language is not an achievement. It is a remembering of the natural state of awareness before thought began naming. The mind believes it understands the world through definitions, but in truth, it only circles around its own reflections. Every description is a mirror showing what has already been conditioned. When perception goes beyond description, that loop breaks. Seeing becomes an act of discovery rather than confirmation. The eyes no longer recognize, they encounter. Beyond language, the familiar world rearranges itself. What once appeared solid becomes fluid. Edges soften, meanings dissolve, and every form seems to pulse from within, alive with a subtle intelligence. The rock, the leaf, the face, all shimmer with the same essence. The division between animate and inanimate collapses. Everything breathes the same breath. The mind, observing this, may panic for a moment. Without labels, orientation seems lost. The self, accustomed to navigating through language, cannot find its usual coordinates. Yet in that disorientation lies liberation. The absence of words reveals a deeper order, the quiet coherence that holds all things together without needing to name them. Silence becomes a lens sharper than any concept. Through it, perception touches the essence of reality rather than its surface. This essence is not hidden. It has always been visible, though rarely seen. What obscures it is the habit of thinking about the world instead of being with it. The revelation beyond language is not a withdrawal into abstraction. It is an intimacy with existence so complete that nothing remains outside of it. Consider the experience of hearing music. When thought comments, "This is beautiful," this reminds me of the listening narrows. But when awareness stays open without judgment or association, the sound moves through you, and you move through it. There is no listener apart from the music. That moment is the same consciousness that sees without language, direct, unmediated, whole. To see the world as it is requires the humility to not know it. The mind must bow before what it cannot define. In that surrender, perception regains its innocence. The eyes become like those of a child who has never learned the names of things, meeting reality as if for the first time. That freshness is not naivety, it is wisdom without thought, a clarity untouched by memory. This revelation does not come through effort, nor does it stay because of discipline. It comes because the observer has stopped reaching. The act of reaching implies distance, and distance is sustained by language. When reaching ends, seeing begins. The world no longer stands opposite you. It unfolds within you. The same awareness that perceives the sky also forms it. The boundary between perceiver and perceived was never real. It was a construct of the word. The silence beyond language is not empty but resonant. It hums with the energy of all things existing at once. Words divide experience into sequence. Silence reveals simultaneity. Every moment contains all others. The past and future dissolve into presence, not as an idea but as direct experience. The observer does not look for meaning anymore, because meaning has become identical with being. Even thought, when it arises from this space, changes its texture. It becomes light, transparent, serving as expression rather than confinement. Words spoken from silence carry the fragrance of that stillness. They do not claim to define, they invite. They point back toward what cannot be spoken but can be lived. The revelation beyond language is not mystical in the sense of belonging to another realm. It is profoundly ordinary, woven into the fabric of daily perception. Washing hands, hearing footsteps, feeling wind across the skin, all are gateways when the observer is silent. Each moment reveals the same truth. Reality has never needed your description to be real. There is a quiet joy in realizing this. The mind, freed from the burden of constant naming, begins to rest. The body follows, the senses open, and life starts to flow through you instead of being processed by you. The simplicity of this state defies explanation because it precedes all explanations. It is not something to understand but to recognize, like remembering your own face after years of forgetting. To live beyond language does not mean abandoning speech, but letting it arise from silence. The difference is subtle, yet total. Words that come from silence are bridges. Words that come from fear are walls. When language is transparent to the stillness behind it, every sentence becomes a doorway back to the unspoken. The revelation is this: the world has never been hidden, only named. The names became veils, and the veils became the illusion of separation. The moment the observer stops describing, the veils lift, and what remains is the pure presence that has never been absent. The bird sings, the wind moves, the sun burns, all of it seen not as objects, but as the living motion of consciousness itself. Beyond language, vision is no longer an act of understanding, but of union. The observer has stopped standing apart and started dissolving into what it sees. There is no need to call it enlightenment or awareness. It is simply what remains when description ends, the real shining through the silence that words can only point toward but never contain. The silence that once felt distant now breathes through every moment. The observer no longer stands apart, seeing flows effortlessly, untouched by thought. The world has not changed, only the lens that once divided it. Every shape, every sound, every breath appears as the same living awareness looking back. There is no effort to define, no urge to grasp. What remains is clarity beyond words, pure vision, still and whole. If you felt this stillness echo inside you, write "I see beyond words" in the comments so I know you've arrived here. And if this journey spoke to something true in you, subscribe and stay close. There is more silence to explore together.